Great. Welcome. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the second of the three-part series called Turn the Tables. This series is brought to you by the WMed Innovation Center in partnership with the Michigan Venture Capital Association. I am Sandra Cocker and I am with the WMed Innovation Center. Turn the Tables is a reverse pitch event where venture capital firms and angel groups get to present to entrepreneurs. They'll share with you their investment focus areas, their submission review processes, their ideal investment criteria, and more. The purpose of this event is to demystify the investment process so entrepreneurs can better understand how investors make investment decisions. Please note that the presentations at this event are not to be considered offers to sell or invest by any of the VCs or angels. Also, during the Q&A period after each presentation, please keep your questions general and focused on the investment process. This is not the time to ask any of the investors to invest in your company. Do feel free to drop your questions into the comments in the chat area, which is located in the little conversation bubble on the top of your screen. Today's presenters in order will be Joe Lampin from Wakestream Ventures. We also have Jeff Barry from Plymouth Growth Partners. Jeff Ponders is joining us from Invest Detroit. And towards the end, we hope to have Paul Mccready from Arboretum Ventures pop in and spend a little time with us as well. Each presenter will have approximately 10 minutes to present their fund. We'll follow that with a few minutes of Q&A. And everyone is going to introduce themselves during their presentation. So I am going to simply jump right in and let Jeff begin. So I will turn it to you, Jeff, or I'm sorry, to Joe. Joe, thank you. You're up first.
Thanks. Good morning. Happy to be here. Thanks for inviting me. Happy to share a little bit about Wakestream Ventures. Wakestream Ventures is we're out of Grand Rapids, Michigan. We're an early stage venture fund. We have our beginnings in an initiative out of Grand Rapids called Start Garden. We were the initial investing arm of the Start Garden ecosystem development initiative that the DeVos family funded in 2012. Our fund is a little bit unique. We are essentially an extension of the DeVos family. We do not have LPs. Which then provides us with a little bit more flexibility, at least we say that anyway. I don't know if that's necessarily true, but with both approach in what types of deals we're looking at, but also time horizons. We don't have a traditional fund kind of function where we're looking to return capital in a certain period of time. So though most of our deals do end up following a lot of those criteria, we have on occasion been able to kind of work outside of some of those constraints. We invest primarily in seed stage and Series A stage startups, but that runs the gamut from consumer products to internet technology, both B2B and B2C, physical products, and pretty much everything except for life sciences. We've got a team that has experiences in a broad spectrum of industries, including medical device, commercial or B2B software. I've got a financial and a commercial banking background, and consumer product. So we have a team of 6, and our deal sourcing typically comes from our network that we've built over the last 9 years. And we invest in companies across the country, though I would say 60%, 70% of our fund, our portfolio exists in the state of Michigan. We always like taking a look at deals in the Midwest and in Michigan, but it is not an exclusive focus of ours. Our deal process is generally, we call it kind of lightweight from a diligence standpoint. What we really like to see are entrepreneurs in their experience and we want to see what they've done, and that kind of comes out of the original Start Garden ethos, where we were funding very small micro investment amounts and essentially using that process to watch entrepreneurs in how they managed the business and how they went about building their business to determine. To help determine anyway our interest in the company. We don't have a deep diligence into a lot of like some of the AI and distributed ledger technologies. So it's probably an area that when we see businesses like that, we use experts to help us vet those out. And then once we've gathered what we feel like is enough information, we have an investment committee meeting and make a unanimous decision on whether or not we want to invest. Our typical check size is somewhere between 100,000 and 500,000 for first check. We've typically invested a max of about $2 million, but again, having some flexibility, we do have certain portfolio companies where we've gone beyond that, and we've followed into the B and the C rounds. I think with that, that's pretty much the basics of what Wakestream is. And so from there, I guess I'll open it up for questions.
Can I ask a quick question too about kind of the, and I hope you didn't say this and I just missed it, a little bit like the investment philosophy and, Wakestream's a relatively newer type of fund. You guys haven't been around like with some of the history like Arboretum has. What was kind of the impetus behind starting Wakestream, that passion and the focus and, like your vision, mission kind of thing for Wakestream?
Yeah. Well, again, coming out of Start Garden, the original thesis was that there are entrepreneurs in the Midwest, Michigan in particular, who are great and could be great entrepreneurs, but just haven't taken that step. And initially, we were writing $5,000 checks to get entrepreneurs, what we'd call off the couch, and over the line and get them going. And we've got a number of really great anecdotal stories showing how that just really worked. And that drives, I think, our interest in new deals still to this day. We like to see entrepreneurs who are scrappy, who have been able to accomplish a lot with a little bit, but also help out with just a little bit of capital to get entrepreneurs going that may not have had a chance outside of the area. We have a portfolio of a lot of first-time founders, and in some of the traditional, probably more coastal funds, those are founders that it's a lot harder to find capital, and so around the right entrepreneurs, we're looking to help get over that hurdle of some of the first-time founder red flags that might be appearing in some of the other deals.
Wonderful. If anyone would like to ask a question, you can either just up at the top, you'll see the little icons. There's one for raise a hand if you'd like, or you can drop it in the chat box if you'd prefer to ask your question in the chat. Don't feel shy about asking questions. There is a question. It looks like someone is asking, and it's Jeff. Can you comment on how you primarily find your deal flow?
Primary, would assume that we had a primary source. Yeah, I think we've built a network of interesting, both venture capital firms across the country, but also thought leaders. We've got some connections into we've got some connections into the fitness space through a gentleman by the name of John Durant that we run into kind of interesting consumer-focused products in the health and wellness, particularly in the nutrition space. We network with a number of, we network really well with the Angel Network here in Michigan, Grand Angels, and through their kind of newly formed Michigan Capital Network group that they're working with. We collaborate with them a lot, do a lot of deal sharing with them. But then we've got, early on in Start Garden days, we built connections into the Chicago and New York scene through a couple of investments into a couple of venture funds. Again, being a little flexible allowed us to do that. That wouldn't necessarily be a traditional investment of a fund. And through those, we've built some networks. And so out of the Midwest region, Chicago's technically still Midwest, but New York and LA we've got kind of connections into those markets based on some of the early networking that we did.
Good, thank you. Marshall would like to know, does Wakestream invest in pre-seed, pre-revenue companies?
We typically have not been over the last several years. That's a great question, a great clarifier, because for us, one of the things that we do like to see, especially when we're talking about consumer products or something consumer facing, is that customer feedback. That's always been one of the things that we looked for, even with those first $5,000 and $20,000 checks that we were writing. and that thesis has kind of filtered into our current model. We like to see revenue. There are certain deals that we will invest into that don't have revenue. We've been involved with Orbion up in Marquette for the last few years, and that is a firm that just simply, it's a high science. It takes a lot of development, and that's just not a business that you're going to be able to invest into, on an iterative approach like that. But generally speaking, we like to see customer traction, even for B2B software.
Right. Thank you. Jeff Rinveld has a question. Jeff, would you like to unmute yourself and ask it?
Sure. First of all, congrats on Orbion. That was a great story. I think it came out just last week, the round side of it. So it's fun watching that one. Having a single LP, I know there's different processes. Can you sort of comment on how your process works? Do you have to go to an investment committee for each deal? Do you sort of get a slug of money and say, okay, this is it for a year? I don't want to get into specifics, but it's like, if you could comment on that, it's always interesting to sort of see the processes a single LP goes through.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good question. I can give you a bit of information on how that's structured and functions. Rick DeVos is on our team, and so he's one of the 6. And we like to joke sometimes we have an investment committee of 1, but at the end of the day, the way Rick manages is he really wants to hear from the 5 of us what our thoughts are, and he's really relying on our diligence and our perception of a market, and that helps him inform his vote. At the end of the day, if the 5 of us vote for a deal, he's not voting against it. There might be a specific deal that he gets really excited about that we're all maybe, we'll invest in that company. So there's that process. To keep us a little bit focused on just making sure that we're not saying yes to everything that looks good, we do have an allocation that we work with on an annual basis. Now, again, that doesn't necessarily mean that we can't increase that or change that, but it helps us narrow in and create a bit of competition for the deals that we're looking at. We don't necessarily have individual members of our firm taking individual deals, and so we're all competing for our own deals in that way. We oftentimes will work collaboratively on the diligence and approval, but it does help us to be able to match up, if we've got 3 or 4 different opportunities that we think are exciting at once, to say, okay, well, what do we really have allocated to, either a new deal this quarter or a new deal this year? I think that brings up another good point. We've got a portfolio of 60 companies, and so we do take a look at new deals, and we love taking a look at new opportunities. We're only adding about 2, maybe 3 new companies to our portfolio a year. So that also helps out with our filtration process, that we know that we're only going to be able to take so many new swings at new deals during any given year, and the rest of it is capital allocation for existing portfolio.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you. Well, I want to keep us on track and moving because we have so many great speakers today. Next up, we're going to hear from Jeff Barry. He's with Plymouth Growth Partners. So Jeff, we are ready when you are.
Great. Thanks, Sandra. I really appreciate you inviting me to be on this panel today. It's given me a sense of normalcy. I don't know if anybody is in Southeast Michigan right now, but I woke up to 3.5 feet of water in our basement on Saturday morning. And so we got all the water out on Saturday, and then we've been cleaning up on Sunday and today. And we have a restoration crew coming in about an hour or so. So being able to step away from all that and do something like we typically do is what I want to say, an abnormal pleasure for me this morning. So I appreciate you inviting me on. So Plymouth Growth Partners, just so everybody knows, we are a growth stage. We're a firm that manages growth stage tech funds, and mainly in the Midwest. And really, what does that mean? Well, it means we're usually investing in companies that have between $2.5 and $7.5 million of revenue when we enter. And we typically enter with a minimum of, let's say, $3.5 million check. We'll write checks at entry point up to $6.5 million as well. So that kind of gives you an idea of what we're investing in. I'll go in a little bit more detail of it in a minute, but I just want to give everybody a sense of kind of the stage that we invest in. We've always said we are stage investors. That's really, where our focus lies and kind of our investment thesis is. So, that's an important part of all of this. So let me start with a little bit of history of how we got together. Our founder is a guy named Ian Bund, and Ian's been in Ann Arbor for a long, long time. And he looked around in the early 2000s and said, Southeast Michigan is so focused on the big three. We really need to diversify our economy, really get more tech deals going, get more tech entrepreneurship going, and really was able to bring in about 30 people that were like-minded. And he formed a super angel fund. And that super angel fund invested in all sorts of things. I mean, it was pizzerias to high-tech software to medical devices and all sorts of different things in different stages. And if a deal was interesting, the 30 people would look at it, form deal teams, and go forward with it. Well, what we saw that came out of that was there were 4 growth stage deals where we took board seats, where we had a real lead role in that did very well. They all did, between, let's say, 2.5 and 4x. They were growth stage deals, so a lot of the commercialization risk was behind them. The IRRs all were between the 40 and 60% range. And we looked at it and we said, that seems to be where our interest lies, where our skills lie, and where we've had success. And we built a strategy around that back right after the Great Recession. We're talking 2008, 2009, 2010. And went out and formed our first committed capital fund. And I joined at that time. I joined in mid-2008 to help raise what we call Plymouth 2, which was our first committed capital fund. And we scratched and clawed during that period of time, right after the Great Recession. Not a great time to raise a fund, as I think all you can imagine. But we were able to scratch and claw and get to a $40 million fund that we deployed relatively rapidly. And we raised our next fund in 2014, which is a $60 million fund, same strategy, which I'll go into in a minute. And then we raised a $70 million fund a few years later. We're raising our next fund as we speak right now and having good traction on that. So what is our strategy? What are we looking for? Historically, we've kind of been a Michigan-based, Midwestern-focused firm. And we still are a Midwestern-focused firm, but we're able now to go outside of the Midwest and look at other deals. We won't be looking at deals in Silicon Valley or Boston or New York, but more the underserved areas. We've seen interesting deals out of Atlanta, Denver, other areas as well that we really want to have the ability to do, and our limited partners want us to do that too. So while we're still focused on the Midwest, we do have the ability to go outside that right now. So originally we were looking for tech companies in the Midwest, and when we talk about scalable technology, which is what we invest in, that's a purposefully broad term for us. And the reason is we really want to have the flexibility to invest in a number of different technologies. We can't just be another SaaS software fund. And while we do invest probably 60 to 70% of our capital in SaaS software, the other 30 to 40% is in a number of different things. That could be, let's say, software, hardware hybrid, which a lot of venture capital firms wouldn't look at. That's something that we'll take a look at when it comes in. Other items, we will do non-recurring revenue models as well. We will do technology-enabled services. Oftentimes they're in the process of going to product, and we'll help them along with some capital to get them there. So we will do things that conventional venture capital or growth equity firms won't do, and we really believe that's to a certain degree a competitive advantage of ours. So yes, Midwestern focused, but we're not limited to that. $2.5 to $7.5 million in revenue when we go in. The average check size when we go in is ranging between $3.5 to $6 million, and we reserve $2 or $3 million for future rounds. We like capital efficiency a lot. It's one of those things where I remember early on 10 years ago, somebody saying out of Silicon Valley, if you're not burning $500,000 a month, the opportunity is not big enough. We do not subscribe to that mentality. We really like to see companies have been able to accomplish a lot with a little, and that allows us to come in and really make an impact when we do our investment. So we like the capital efficiency, keep the cash burn low, not a whole lot of capital in when we come in, and from there we typically put in our $3, $4, $5 million. We take a board seat. We, like any other firm, we try to add value in a number of different ways. We have a playbook that we adhere to for each new investment, which involves recruiting, activities from an audit committee and a comp committee perspective. Really professionalizing board activity is really something that we have a focus on when we come into these companies. Because oftentimes you come into a company that's doing, let's say, $4 million of ARR. What's interesting about almost every one of those that we look at is that their board function is, really could use some professionalization, and that the sales function needs some scalability to it. So a lot of our money goes into when we invest, adding features to the tech and really professionalizing and scaling the sales function. Those are the two things that our money typically goes into to create value into the companies that we've invested in. Now, what is the process? This is something I think Sandra wanted to be a focus of what we're talking about here today. We really do not want to be one of those funds that waste the time of the entrepreneurs that we talk to. We understand that time is so important for ourselves and for the founders and entrepreneurs that we engage with. So we really try to get to an initial go or no go quite quickly. We hear a lot of comments out there in the market about the 8-month dance to no. That's not something any of us are interested in, just because it's a waste of time for both sides. So we are relatively fast to term sheet, and people might say, well, does that mean that a lot of companies die in diligence after that because you haven't done a lot of pre-term sheet diligence? That just typically has not been the case for us. So what we do is we have initial conversations, typically by Zoom or over the phone with the management team. Pre-COVID and starting now, the next step would be a on-site visit where we meet more of the team and spend the day there. And then we invite key people of parts of management to come in and present to our team. And at that point, it really comes out, is there momentum supporting this deal? And if there's momentum supporting that deal coming out of that meeting, that's typically in our conference room with our whole team, we try to get to a term sheet at that point. And then there's some negotiation. And once that term sheet's signed, our real goal is to get closing within 45 days. We want to get that money in. We want to get there as quickly as we can so that the company can start using that money to build more value. And what that really means is, the 45 days, we're on site a lot of those days, because what we feel is that when we're there on site and we're doing diligence, we're having a lot of meetings. But if we hear one thing in one meeting, we might be able to just walk over to the CEO's office and walk in and say, hey, we just heard this. What do you think? And that really helps for diligence to move quickly and allows us to get smart. And when we look at the diligence process, a key part of it is we know we're going to take a board seat on this company, on this company's board. And for us to do really deep dive diligence, it makes us smart so that when we do join that board, we're hitting the ground running at that point. And we've seen a lot of things that maybe the other board members haven't, since they've been on the board, simply because we've been doing the deep dive diligence. So that's really important from our perspective. So those 45 days is 30 days of really heavy business due diligence, engage the attorneys once we see this deal really going to closing, move the attorneys to closing as quickly as possible. Then we close, the money goes in. And we typically, as part of diligence, have a 100-day plan that we don't want everybody to take a deep breath after getting the money in and say, okay, we've done our job, now we can kind of rest for a few weeks. No, we want the company to say, okay, we're coming out of diligence. We've had these people look at our company in detail for 45 days. And let's see, the plan that came out of it, this 100-day plan, let's hit the ground running to try to get some low-hanging fruit to increase value quickly. And it really is, maybe hiring a CRO, maybe hiring a CFO. There's a number of different things, adding a feature that's not going to take a whole lot of tech to get there. And things like that we use to get things moving. So we typically have take that board seat, sit on the board for 3 to 5 years, and really run to exit, as soon as a number of metrics that we set forth in our diligence period are met, whether it's growth rate, whether it's a certain amount of ARR at a time. A lot of times it's all of these. It's maybe increasing your gross margin above 85%. We set these goals where if after 7 or 8 metrics are hit, we say, I think it's time. I think we've hit the value. Let's hire an investment bank and get out to market. Now, the structure of our team right now, there are 8 of us. We just brought on our 8th employee in the last couple of months, named Allison Todak, who's our director of platform. But we have 4 deal-making partners. And pre-COVID and starting now, we would be traveling all over the Midwest. I always liked it best when I knew Evan Ufer was up in Wisconsin traveling around, when Kevin Tarosky was in Chicago, when Brooke Critchfield is in Columbus, when I'm in Indianapolis. When that's happening, we're typically creating some good things. And we haven't been able to do a lot of that over the last year. I'm really happy to say that we're going to be able to start doing it again and now it looks like. And so we have 4 deal-making partners. We have a CFO. We have our founder, who's still actively involved in the firm. We have an operating partner, and as I said, our new director of platform. And this director of platform position is an interesting one because she's really been tasked with 2 things. One is opening up new markets for us. Let's talk Kansas City, St. Louis, Pittsburgh, these type of places where we haven't invested in the past. But she's also there to help our portfolio companies. You know, when we bring in a new portfolio company, she's part of the diligence plan saying, what can we do to help them? And she really is the conduit for that. So if there's somebody at one of our portfolio companies that says, we're really struggling with this, the first point of contact might be their board member from Plymouth. The next point of contact would be Allison, and Allison would coordinate our response to give them some help in the area that they're looking for. Now, I just laid down a lot of information. I think I probably went over my allotted time, but I think I covered everything. So with that, happy to open it up to questions.
Great. No, that was wonderful. Thank you. Questions, anyone? If you'd like to ask a question online, you can go ahead and raise your hand, or you can drop it in the chat, whichever makes you happy. And then while we wait for one, I have a question. Can you comment on this? And I'm sure a lot of the other panelists will have some thought on this, but can you comment on how deeply involved you as an investor get with the company? Because I sometimes meet entrepreneurs who think, I'm going to go, I'm going to get an investment, they're going to write me a big check, and then I'm going to go do my thing. And I think that's a bit of a misconception.
Well, it really depends on the culture of the firm. Most firms will say and are heavily involved in the company after their money goes in. All right. There are some firms that are relatively passive. I mean, the money goes in and they sit on the board and they get reported to, and that's fine. That's just their way of doing it. And they probably have more board seats per partner as well. But, you know, it's one of those things where our involvement can be significant if things are going really well or things are going really poorly. Our involvement kind of goes up in those types of situations. If things are going along as planned, you know, we have board seats and we play the role of the board, and we're often one of the more experienced board members. Typically, when we invest, we often invest after, you know, a small Series A fund might have put in $1 million or $2 million into the company, and they're always good partners for us. But I would say that we talk to our CEOs at a minimum on a weekly basis, and it's often 2 to 3 times a week is when we're talking. You know, they're typically calling us when they have a challenge and they say, you know, I just want to run this by you. Is there any way you can help? And or they want to give us an update of some sort. And but yeah, it's at a minimum weekly. And you know, you never want the dynamic to be where you're part of management. Okay, that's going a little bit too far. We have had portfolio companies that become very reliant on the Plymouth lead to the point where they're not making decisions without our blessing, and that's just not a way that that's not a dynamic we necessarily support by any means.
Sounds like it's a balance, a delicate balance. Yeah. Jeff Rinvelt has a question. Jeff, go ahead and unmute yourself.
Hey, Jeff, thanks. And so sorry to hear about your basement. We're hearing that from lots of people. There's, you know, you're not alone, but it's no longer any fun. I know, exactly. Yeah. So
I'll say the benefit, Jeff, is that we've gotten a lot of exercise for the last 2 to 3 days. So.
I bet you have. You know, I mean, you're you know, if you're tracking your flights of stairs, it's usually it's definitely over. Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
my Fitbit has loved this.
Exactly. There you go. Yeah, exactly. You know, you alluded to a little bit, but you know, how has your process changed with COVID-19, especially being a growth stage? We're still seeing some of the early stages going completely virtual. You know, sort of where have you guys, as it being a later stage, you know, firm, sort of settled on, you know, now that we're post-COVID?
Yeah. So we were able to function during COVID. Well, I'll step back and say we truly believe face-to-face relationships are critical. All right. Absolutely critical. And I know there's some going away from that a little bit. When I talked about being on site for diligence, obviously that was pre-COVID or what we hope to be in the near future. And we always thought that was a critical part of what we did. It allowed us to get to know a company very well. And when you're sitting in a company 2 or 3 days a week, you get to know their culture really, really well. All right. So we believe that's important, and it's something that we need to continue to do. The problem is we still need to deploy capital, and we had one deal that we did complete fully virtual in during COVID. We closed it in December, and our Zoom calls with them were pretty much 4 to 6 hours. And our lead on that, he will look us all in the eye and say he and our second chair on the deal got to know that company extraordinarily well. And while they weren't able to sit there and be in there and really learning the culture, they were able to get the job done. So during COVID, to answer your question, is yes, we needed to continue to look at companies, look at deal flows, look at the companies that we're interested in, and do our best to close on them. And we were effective at doing that with one. Our deal flow now has gotten up to the point where it's strong, the quality is high, and we have people actually coming into our office. And we are visiting other offices as well. Now, a lot of the companies that we're interested in that are raising capital right now, they're still virtual. So going into their office or meeting there, we might be there with the CEO by themselves, and that's not all that valuable, really. We expect things to get somewhat back to a pre-COVID level relatively soon. That's our hope and expectation. We did change our process to the point where we were able to close something over Zoom. That's not something we necessarily really want to do, but it might save a lot of time to have those initial calls by Zoom as opposed to going too early on site. We might do that a little bit later than we might have in a pre-COVID situation, because I think we look at Zoom and Teams and we say it's a relatively effective tool. It's not perfect by any means. There's something better, but it's not bad. And so it really might put off the on-site visit, until a little bit later in the process, but not a lot later. And other than that, Jeff, coming out of this, I don't think there's a whole lot of change in the way that we do things. In the middle of it, absolutely. It was just harder to get to know teams.
Great. Thank you. Thank you. Great question, Jeff Renbelt, and great answer, Jeff Barry. So our third presenter is getting ready to come on. Jeff Ponders is with us, and he's going to talk to us about Invest Detroit. Jeff?
Thank you, Sandra. It's a pleasure to be here with you guys. My name is Jeff Ponders II. I am a principal with ID Ventures. We are part of Invest Detroit. So Invest Detroit has been around for 25 years, and ID Ventures has been investing in early stage startups across the state of Michigan for about the last 10 years. We really came to be as an effort for economic development and finding ways to both attract and retain talent in Michigan while also helping create jobs through early stage ventures. And we've been very, very active in those efforts over the last 10 years. Though last year, I'd say we've been more active than we've ever been. We deployed about just over $6 million in 98 deals. And I want to say we're involved in roughly 80% of the venture-backed deals that happened in the state of Michigan last year. So pandemic hit and we said, let's go ahead and roll our sleeves up and get dirty and help keep things going here. So we focus on early stage capital. So this is pre-seed, seed stage, and Series A, with intentions to follow on roughly through Series A, in some cases a little bit past. Primary remit for our thesis is Michigan-based companies. Again, we are focused on helping to support the economy of the state of Michigan. And so founders who are either based here or maintain primary operations here in the state of Michigan drives our investment decisions. We look for companies that have an MVP developed. We invest in a really broad set of industries: life sciences, SaaS, prop tech. We've even touched a little bit of CPG. But again, what we look for are scalable businesses with strong founders and proof of traction. We often invest in a syndicate. However, there are some cases with very, very early stage deals that we will lead and take an entire round. Again, the biggest thing here is we're looking for strong teams with really good evidence of a scalable, venture-backable model. And we look at ourselves as really helping these great founders get to a place of really get to that Series A. We help bridge them to Series A. We have 4 funds, and we are actively investing every single month. It's a lot of fun. In fact, actually, one of the things I'm really, really proud of with what we've done last year, as pandemic hit, I mentioned, we did 98 investments, but as we literally doubled the size of our portfolio, I am a fruit of the doubling of that size, and I was brought in a few months back, and we just brought in a new associate as well to help manage not only the increased portfolio, but also help take advantage of some of the increased deal activity in the state of Michigan. Other things that are really, really interesting. So thinking about our process, it can be as short as 2 weeks. It can be as long as a few months, just depending on the nature of the deal. Um, folks who come through our front door typically meet with one of our analysts. After that screening call, we bring them, there's an early assessment made, and from there they meet with either myself or Ben Bernstein, both principals on it, and we kind of go, we make the decision if we're going to enter into diligence. The diligence process, again, depending on how the deal is structured and the heat behind it, could take anywhere from a couple weeks to a few months, hopefully not that long. We like to make decisions pretty fast because nobody wants to sit there waiting on money. But we take a lot of pride in making sure that we're not only being a good partner for our founders and also the folks who are in our ecosystem, but also making sure that we deliver quality deals for our LPs who are really invested in the state of Michigan. Once we get through diligence and an official green light is given, we take it before an investment committee, which is made up of partners from across the state. And once we get through that review, official green light is given or not, and we stay in good communication with our founders throughout the entire process. Once funds are wired, assuming that the deal is going through, we have a welcome call, and we take a lot of pride in providing support to our founders throughout the entire process, both through the funding decision as well as once they're part of the family. And we really do consider them to be family. I jokingly call them our kids, even though I'm actually not that young, but there are quite a few of them who might have me beat by a couple years and a hairline or two. At any rate, we take a lot of pride in supporting them with both mentorship. I come with a background from a lot of strategy and marketing, and so we provide really boots on the ground support as well, helping them to tackle key strategic challenges. But we've also, while we focus on companies based in the state of Michigan, we recognize that it's also important to bring dollars into the state. And so we built a network of partners from across the country who are also investing in our companies. And we look at those not only as partnerships for the sake of investing, but also for helping our founders scale their companies. And so it's everything from business development, sourcing talent, and everything in between. Beyond that, I think one of the other things that we're starting to explore right now too, which is kind of interesting, if you look at Invest Detroit proper, we've got the venture side, which is ID Ventures, but we also have our economic development side on Invest Detroit Invest Detroit as a name, and we're one of the largest lenders and small business development organizations in the city of Detroit. And so we've started to explore how some of the opportunities that exist there for those small businesses can be supported by the companies that exist through our venture investments as well. We've got a small but mighty team that has increased by 3 or 4 people in the last 6 months. And we're very, very proud of that. You guys know Patty Glaza and Martin Dover, but I've joined in a DT and a few others. So we're really excited to be growing rapidly. And again, looking to scale our activity across the state and find ways to continue to support early stage ventures. So, yeah.
All right, thank you. That was a really great briefing about ID Ventures. Does anyone have any questions? I see one popping up here in the chat. Marshall would like to know, how does ID Ventures structure their investments?
Sure. We are pretty flexible, actually. So we often invest on safes and notes, but it's not uncommon to be participating in a price round. And I guess it's also important to mention, usually our typical first check is somewhere between 100 and 150,000. A bit more often when we're dealing with a life sciences company. So.
Okay, great, thank you. And Markesia Pierce has a question. Markesia, can you unmute yourself and ask it?
Sure. Thank you. I was wondering what type of milestones or achievements you look for particularly the life sciences, that could be like regulatory or data, something around that nature.
Sure. Oddly enough, I would love to say that there's a standard, but we have companies that come in at such a broad range of places. So it could be everything from in most cases, folks they've got product and market. In many cases, have product market fit. So we work with founders actually to set those milestones in many cases. With life sciences, we know that the time frame can be really, really long in some cases. So it can be everything from getting through different stages of FDA approval, could be securing IP. again, it's really dependent on the company, but we work very closely with them to set milestones that make sense. And again, we think about what are those milestones that will unlock the next rounds of funding.
Great, thank you. Is there anyone else with a question? Again, either pop it in the chat or go ahead and raise your hand and I will call on you. Jeff Renvelt, I think, did your hand just go up?
Yeah, I can always ask a question. You know, Jeff knows that. And all you guys know that side of it too. But your funnel is so wide. I'm just wondering how you guys sort of become, you know, at least knowledgeable to put some money to work in all these different industries. Do you work on experts, or how deep do you want to go basically in those areas?
That's a fantastic question. And it does feel like a fire hose from time to time. So a couple things. One, you know, the team brings a lot of broad expertise. So example, I come from oddly enough, a bunch of different industries. You guys know Patty. Patty has been deep in a ton of things as well. Same with Martin. So we've done a good job of building a team that is broad and deep in our expertise, but we also recognize we don't know everything. And so we do a lot to lean into our partners from not just in the state, but across the country with domain expertise. And we try to cultivate new relationships all the time. Just as an example, we just formed a really, really cool relationship with an organization out of New York that has deep domain expertise in hospitality and restaurants. And so we've got a couple companies in our portfolio that have technology that makes a ton of sense for that. And so now, not just for the sake of vetting deals, but also, again, adding value to the folks in our family. So that's really how we do it. We recognize in order to scale, it just can't always sit in-house.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you. And I am delighted we have our fourth person here is able to join us. Paul Mccready from Arboretum Ventures is here. Thank you for taking the time. You are not the only one who is fighting the basement cleanup. So I appreciate you being able to join us today. So Paul, we're all just introducing ourselves. I'll let you introduce yourself and tell us what's going on with Arboretum. Tell us about you.
Sure. Thanks, Sandra. I'm happy to be here, and sorry that I had to join a little bit late, but this actually worked out well that I was the fourth of four. So my name is Paul Mccready. I'm a partner and the chief operating officer at Arboretum Ventures. We are a healthcare focused venture fund that operates in Ann Arbor, Michigan. We've been around since 2002. Our fund was founded by Jan Garfinkel and Tim Peterson back at that time when they were raising a first fund that was closed in 2003. And over the last nearly 20 years now, it's hard to believe that we're going to be coming up on a 20-year anniversary. We've raised 4 other funds, and it's been about a 4-year to 5-year cycle on each of those with progressively larger funds, culminating with a 2019 Fund 5 that was closed at $250 million in total capital. So over the funds 1 through 5 that I just sort of referred to, Arboretum manages about $700 million in capital. Back to myself, just briefly, I'm a Michigan native. I went to school and was educated at University of Michigan as an engineer, worked in the auto business for about 8 or 10 years before joining Arboretum. And the connection that I made with Arboretum was through the MBA program at Ross when I completed that, because at the time, Tim Peterson, who I mentioned as one of the founding partners at Arboretum, was running the Wolverine Venture Fund, and I was a participant on that fund as a student. So it's kind of a nice connection through Ross, but that's how I found my way into venture, and I've been here since 2006. So I'm also 15 years in the business with Arboretum. And so now we have a team of 16. We have 9 investment professionals, 4 managing partners that are investing in the fund. And I split my time, as I mentioned briefly, between sort of investing activities and sitting on several boards, along with running our firm's operations. So that really relates to a lot of the management of the investment team, and deal execution is really what that gets down to. And man, are we busy with that right now. We have had one of the busiest periods in our history, honestly, in terms of new investing activities over the last 9 months. After a little bit of a slowdown during the middle of the pandemic, we certainly perceive a lot of great investment opportunities that are out there now raising capital, and we've closed on several investments recently and have several others under term sheet right now. So within healthcare, we've got a pretty broad footprint. To say it very simply, we focus on all the areas really other than biopharmaceuticals. We have made exceptions to that over, from time to time, but primarily our focus in healthcare are traditional medical technologies like devices and diagnostics, as well as health IT and service companies, and also those companies that are in the sort of life science research tools or life science instrument space. But therapeutics like drug discovery and biopharmaceuticals is not a huge area of focus. We are early stage investors by most people's definition, but I would say that that's the one area of our investment philosophy that's rather flexible and we're not terribly prescriptive with. Most of the investments we make are Series A or B deals where the companies are at or near early commercialization, but very infrequently are we investing in a mature stage company with tens of millions in revenue. But it does happen from time to time, and it's very situational. Our check size from a $250 million fund tends to be in the $6 to $10 million range initially, and that sort of assumes an earlier stage deal because we're obviously holding back considerable reserves. But we would anticipate having about 15 investments in this current fund, and we're just a little over halfway there. So, approaching kind of 2/3 of the way through this fund, and at some point in time in the not too distant future, we're going to start talking about a subsequent fund still. In terms of our strategy, so we really do prioritize kind of the better, faster, cheaper model of innovation. And our view is, especially on the clinical side, simpler kind of wins, and it really helps drive quicker adoption, especially if it's a medical device or something that really has like a clinician or a physician hand on it. We are looking for opportunities that really improve patient outcomes and overall health, but what underlies a lot of this is cost reduction. So we're looking to very meaningfully take cost out of care delivery. And that can be done in a variety of ways, with things that are more efficient and require less time, but even things that improve access to care or enable lower cost sites of care. Examples would be telemedicine or other home-based care delivery models that we've invested in before. One of the things that's really fundamental in our returns and finding our way to good economics is capital efficiency. So another very central element of our strategy deals with how capital efficient do we believe this company can be to deliver on their product or launch their product, and then in turn allow us to have a sale of the business or an exit event that allows us to really drive superior returns. And those are significantly impacted by how much money the company has to raise over time, because the more it has to raise, generally speaking, the lower our ownership and the more dilution that we suffer. It's the same scenario to a company founder or a CEO. He or she's very incentivized to be capital efficient. And that also gets to our footprint geographically. Without a doubt, we've found companies that are able to operate in the Midwest, or they can do so at a much lower cost of input and probably somewhere on the order of 30 or 40% with less capital than coastal opportunities. Now, that doesn't mean that we exclusively invest in the Midwest, but we've got a very significant footprint here and target areas that we would consider underventured, where there's just not a tremendous amount of capital chasing deals. That said, we have coastal investments as well, a number of active companies in California and Bay Area and other hotbeds, Boston area and other sort of hubs. But we really do look very hard and work hard to create partnerships and relationships with our co-investors or other CEOs in the Midwest, because we've just had a lot of great success investing here. And some of our largest returns that have been the best returns in our fund's history have been Ann Arbor companies. So we want to make sure that we're spending a lot of time with the people here and developing those relationships such that we have great access to deals. So I think that really covers a lot of the basics of Arboretum. And Sandra, you can tell me if I've kind of missed any key points, but that's a little bit about us, how we operate. And, we're really excited about the the growth in even in the 15 years that I've been with Arboretum, just the growth of the industry in the state of Michigan and the number of partners that are now here, or the number of funds that may not be domiciled in Michigan, but have investment interests here has really grown, over time. And I know, Jeff Rinvelt, who's on the call here, could certainly speak to that, because a lot of what Renaissance has done is exactly that, about bringing investment activities and other fund interests into the state, and it's really evident in the last decade of how that's grown. So I'm happy to answer any questions.
Great, thank you. Do we have any questions? Remember, you can put them in the chat, or you can simply raise your hand. Give a moment and see. Everyone's probably like, their brains are so busy absorbing all of this. So I have a question, and I'll ask you, Paul. It kind of goes to everybody, but I'm going to ask Paul. Have you been finding, so you guys are Series A, you're a little bit later stage. A lot of you, they're doing Series A investment. How's your deal flow looking? Are you finding that there is enough deal flow in Michigan, in the Midwest, or are you really needing to stretch outside of the Midwest region to really find opportunities? How's that working for you, Paul?
Well, it's hard to look back in short, periods of time. I would say right now there are not any companies immediately in Michigan that we are actively working on. If I look a little bit longer term, I think that there's still a good number of Michigan companies that are out raising capital. I'd say if there's any area where there's a scarcity, it's a lot at the very earliest stages, which is why funds like ID are so vital to our region, because that first check and that first amount raised is one of the more difficult things to come by. But speaking broadly, I would say our deal flow is sort of off the charts in terms of, I believe there's a fair amount of pent up demand from companies that have weathered a little bit of the 2020 storm. And there's just a lot of companies that are out now raising money. As I mentioned before, this is going to be probably the busiest year we've ever had if the measure is just how many new deals have we closed on, because it's considerable. And I perceive the overall deal flow nationally to be very high. At this point in time in Michigan, we're not working on anything specifically.
All right, any other questions? Wow. Oh, there we go. Jeff Rinvelt, I can always count on you. Unmute and ask.
Yeah, you can always ask me, and Paul knew I was coming. You seem to have the best sort of perspective on medical devices, in sort of the area Arboretum does, and it's such a big area for Michigan. I'm just wondering if you can sort of comment in general, how the funding cycle is sort of going in that area, and any I just know I see a lot of medical devices sort of raising funds in Michigan. And if there's any perspective you can give me on how, is it still fairly late stage? What sort of the trends you're seeing?
Yeah, Jeff, I think the medical device area is one that's been more difficult to find your way to doing the earliest stages, because this is something that's definitely changed over my time in venture and my time in the industry, is that it used to be the sort of thing where there was a lot of valuation step ups and a lot of milestone progress over the life of a device company if you were a Series A investor. Now, unfortunately, a lot of the returns are left to the later stages because there's just not a tremendous amount of uptick in value until the company is commercial. So all of the clinical work and a lot of the regulatory work is one of those things where I think most funds have pointed their ship slightly later stage on the device side. And that phenomenon, I think, is more present in medical devices than any other subsector that we invest in, which is all the more reason, to my earlier point, where it's tough to find some of the earliest funding because, put simply, I don't think that the earliest investors are rewarded like they should be for taking that earliest stage risk.
Thank you. We have time for one more question, and that's good because Bernard has his hand up. If you could unmute and ask your question.
Yeah, hi Sandra. Thanks for putting this together. It's been really interesting. So I'm Bernard from Michigan Israel Business Accelerator, and as we're talking to these Israeli companies that are looking to, we're trying to convince them to set up their U.S. operations, North American operations here in Michigan. And sometimes, not very often, but sometimes they are looking for investment and funding as well. I guess question for any of you really is what does it take from these companies that you'd be able to invest in a foreign company? I would assume at minimum setting up a U.S. entity and stuff like that. But I'm just curious, how that works from your end.
Well, I guess since I had the floor, maybe I'll make a first comment. First off, it's incredible the amount of innovation that happens in Israel. I mean, on a per capita basis, it's off the charts in terms of how much incredible innovation and invention happens there. We've looked at a number of Israel-based technologies that are coming to commercialize in the U.S., and your suspicion is correct, at least from Arboretum's perspective. We would require there to be operations of some variety in Michigan or in the U.S. for us to consider an investment. We wouldn't necessarily make an investment, although we technically could, but we wouldn't seek to do that for a company that's wholly based in Israel, just because of some of the obvious challenges with that logistically. Mm-hmm. But a number of times we have looked at companies that are looking to raise capital in the U.S. and concurrent with that, open up or establish operations where they might have kind of, ops and sales in the U.S., but a lot of could be manufacturer or R&D still based in Israel.
Okay.
Would any of the other panelists like to weigh in on that?
I can just, I can also say one of the roles that I've had the luxury of taking is being a participant in a program called Seamless that works with a number of large enterprises in the West Michigan region, and Israel is a primary source of technology that this group looks at, and so we see a lot of technology coming out of there. We have not historically just looked that far out. I would concur that if we were going to look at a firm, it would have to be either they're operating, their primary business is going to, like their first market is going to be in the U.S., and then they would establish, I would expect, an office in the U.S. somewhere. I am right now taking a look at our first out of the U.S. company. But again, it's because they're looking at the United States as a major market for them to enter into, and they will technically be a U.S.-based company. So,
great, thank you all. And with that, we are approaching our time. So I would like to take a moment and first of all say thank you to all of our presenters today for this eye-opening look inside the investment process. And thank you to the Michigan Venture Capital Association for their support in organizing this series. And lastly, I'd like to thank all of you participants for joining us today for the second Turn the Tables event. I hope you'll join us again on September 21st when we will have 3 more VC firms sharing their stories. Those investors will be announced in the next few months. Also, please consider joining us for Kalamazoo Venture Tuesday, which will be next month on July 27th at 9 a.m. KVT is a traditional pitch event in which we will have 3 companies pitching to 3 investors, and after which the investors will share what they liked, what went wrong, how the pitches can be improved. Our companies for July 27th will be Iris DX, a life science company working with extracellular vesicles. We will also have Live Your Song, an educational technology company developing a wellness app for students. And finally, we'll have Endonics, an IT firm helping managers and employees communicate more effectively. Our esteemed panel of investors for that event will be Lindsay Aspergren from North Coast Ventures, Chris Stallman from Fontanellis, and Rob Ball from Cultivate MD. And you can register for the KVT meeting on our website, which I will drop in the chat in just a moment. And again, I would like to thank you all for joining us and wish you all a wonderful day. Thank you.
Andrea, bye-bye.